My mom always says somebody could come in today and give us $2 million. $2 million will never bring Rami back. For anybody that thinks that it's about money, no amount of money is worth your loved one. Rami coming back meant us being poor and living in a box. We would take it. We already have suffered a lot more than that.
And, when I think of him, I always think of how he lived life, how he loved life. When I visit him in Puerto Rico, I feel at home because I know that he's resting. The hardest thing that I have is that it's very hard going into a church. I feel like when I enter the church, my father is there.
In 2020, COVID was the second leading cause of death in New York and New Jersey. Since then, over 116,000 New York and New Jersey deaths have been reported to the CDC due to COVID. But what about those who do not have COVID listed on the death certificates, but tested for COVID leading up to their passing? When we think back to traumatizing events, sometimes it's not until years later when families finally see some relief. Financial benefits, like funeral costs and others, may not come until much later. While it's been over 3 years, these COVID families say they're not asking for an immediate handout or pity, but looking for closure. Janice Coney lost her husband, Eric, in April 2021.
And it was the middle of the night. They actually had trouble finding a doctor or contacting his doctor. Because he was just released from the hospital 3 days prior, I was told that there was no need to perform an autopsy because his death was not deemed suspicious. So I had assumed that when I got the death certificate, everything that he was dealing with would have been listed on there as a cause, including COVID.
My brother's name is Rami. He was only 40 years old when he passed away. And when we went to go pick up my brother's body, he was in the COVID zone. I got a funeral home that was nearby to come and take my brother's body. At the time, they were not doing autopsies for anybody that's COVID suspects. We couldn't find anybody that would be willing to do any kind of exam to figure out what the real cause of death was.
Up until September 2025, individuals can apply for COVID-19 funeral assistance, up to $9,000 through FEMA. To be eligible, the death must be attributed to COVID. To these women, the grief journeys are devastating enough. But what about the aftermath? Will there be additional help available in the future?
After a while, I couldn't get a death certificate, so I had to call the police. And once they began an investigation, a death certificate was finally issued out, and all it says is natural causes. There's the FEMA benefits that we talk about, but what if in the future, I think of like 9/11. 9/11 benefits and things like that weren't even being discussed till maybe 4 or 5 years after 9/11 happened to the US. Will our families be excluded again because our death certificate doesn't say COVID, even though we were at that time and everything else said COVID? But at the end of the day, I just want that closure. I know that my brother didn't die of natural causes at 40 years old.
And did you ever try to amend the death certificate?
I am trying to pursue it again because I just feel that he can't rest in peace until this is resolved. I still haven't even picked up his ashes. I feel like I can't really bring him home until that's resolved. He was a frontline worker. He was out there every single day during the pandemic when the rest of us, most of us, stayed home. And for him to sacrifice his life and then ultimately die from this virus and not even get the credit for that, it's devastating.
NBC New York reached out to FEMA to see if other COVID-related federal benefits are in the works, and a spokesperson replied, there is currently no plan for additional assistance programs. An official death certificate is still needed to qualify for COVID-19 funeral assistance.
My story is just one story. There's so many stories because I know that so many people went through so much pain. You're not alone, and your voice matters. You will make a difference. And you should get the help that you needed for your family. Whether it was a year later, whether it was 2 years later, but you should get the help like everybody else did.
These women agree the most important piece is searching for the truth. Reporting from New Jersey, I'm Linda Gaudino, News 4 New York.